Welcome to the Meditation Mama podcast. I'm your host, Lyndsey, mama to 3 highly sensitive children, and founder of the Meditation Mama Company. On this show, we talk about motherhood, parenting, spirituality, personal growth, and shifting old paradigms that are ready to go so that you can live your most authentic, soul-aligned life. I also release special guided meditations that will help you open your heart, clear out any blocks, and soothe your nervous system. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is a deep, insightful, meaningful conversation with my dear friend, Katerina Gray. She is the founder of Heart-Powered Living. And Kat is so many things, it's almost hard for me to describe what all she does, but she does one-to-one coaching, mentorship, intuitive soul readings, she does group programs, she does retreats, she works with conscious entrepreneurs, she works with women who are struggling in their relationship because they are awakening and their husband is not. She is just a powerhouse. She's a generator in human design, clearly. And she is a beautiful, beautiful soul and light. I personally worked with Katerina in a 9-month group mentorship program for spiritual entrepreneurs. And to say that it was life-changing is an understatement. That program was so powerful. The women in it were just so beautiful and amazing. And Kat has this way of holding space for you, unlike almost any other person I've met. She is so deeply compassionate and so in tune with her heart, and you'll feel it in this episode. So we talk about all kinds of things. I always say I want to keep these episodes, 30, 35 minutes or less, but I could not chop this into 2 because it just flowed so nicely. So we start with Kat sharing her insight in coaching women who have a spiritual awakening while their husband is still, quote, asleep. She actually has a free course on her website called I'm Awake and They Are Not. If this is you, you have to sign up for this. We talk about marriage communication, living a more intentional relationship, reevaluating your desires as a couple, the divine feminine, the divine masculine. How do we rise to become this as a society? What does that even mean? It's such a buzzword. We talk about our children and fostering their strengths as individuals, modeling your core values as a parent. She shares some of the things she's navigated as a parent with 2 children who are in the kind of later elementary school. We also touch on wine culture, which was kind of like a fun little aside, and you'll hear our perspectives on alcohol. And then we kind of end the episode with helping our children navigate being around many different types of people and finding your purpose in life and just connecting with your heart and soul. This episode, as I'm recording this, wow, it's 11:11. I just noticed this episode is just so full of magic and wisdom and just so loving and nurturing. I think you're going to have a lot of key takeaways. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode with Katerina Gray.
The lived experience that I have had of navigating the relationship with my husband. We've been together for over 20 years, but upon my very dramatic awakening, he was not anywhere near this. In fact, he was like the complete opposite, the other side of the spectrum. And I had to go through the experience of seeing him through the lens of compassion, respecting the pace of his journey, and this lived experience of getting to the other side of it and seeing him begin to shift has given me a unique perspective, because there is so much in the spiritual community of you are awake, claim your power, leave your partner, you deserve someone better. I'm here to offer another alternative, another way of moving through a relationship. And even if you decide to leave, let yourself leave from a place of, I have compassion for you. I have deep love for you. I see your soul. You're just not for me. So instead of an F you, bye, it's thank you, bless you, goodbye, if that makes sense.
When women come to you specifically for this type of coaching, what's the first few pieces of guidance or advice that you give them when they are struggling with this?
So the first thing I hear is the blame for him being stuck in victimhood, in density, and not seeing me, and my light irritates him, and I can't come fully into my power because of him. And my response to that is, you are not to rise, you're not to wait for him to rise. You are actually to rise no matter in what state he is in, and hold your light and bring compassion and soften while you're doing it. Because it is only in your softening and not withholding any love, withholding the exchange of energy flowing from your heart to him, that he feels safe to show up vulnerably. Because ultimately, we all want our partner to show some vulnerability, to show emotion. Women come and say, he can't show his emotions. Well, can you look through the lens of compassion where he's coming from? What was his mother-father relationship like? What did he grow up like? What has society conditioned him to be like? So can you bring compassion into that? And we so desperately want our partners and all the men to show up in the divine masculine personification, but we are not looking at ourselves and recognizing that what we might think is the divine feminine is actually not. We are still in the immature and the wounded feminine. And that's how we are showing up. And we're stuck in a cycle that we can't get out of.
Wow. That was powerful, Kat. So I guess what is step one with all of this, besides showing, pointing out that discrepancy in their way of thinking and having them focus on their own light and their own selves, because that will, you and I have talked about this. When you focus on yourself and you are your happiest, brightest, most authentic self, everything else follows. The friendships that are aligned, your partner notices, they might start acting different. You're a happier mother if you have children, everything else follows. What about the women who are just like, they're at the end of their rope in a sense, and their husband doesn't want to change, or their partner is like, I don't care to change?
The journey of becoming intentional. That's the first thing, is what do you want from life? What do you want your relationship to look like? When you sit down and ask yourself that, and if you can define for yourself, and then sit down with your partner and have that conversation, a very honest conversation of what is it do we actually want? And if she responds saying, I want to grow, I want to have adventure, I want to experience and live life fully, and he doesn't, which I honestly don't think he will say that. I think he will say, I want that too, I just don't know how to get there. Okay, we have something to work with. If there's a desire but there's no I don't know how, there's an opening right there, right? The main thing that we are all struggling with is the second piece of the heart powered methodology. After you've regained your intention, reconnected to what it is you actually desire, is the mindfulness part. It's how do we begin to work with our minds to open them, to clear them, to quiet them, to reprogram them, to get out of the victim and to see that we can do something. So if there is a yes to wanting to stay together and wanting to build something, You can find a way. You can, right? And the first thing, and I'm hearing it's like for so many of us, we don't actually have respect for each other. We see each other through the lens of the ego that is counting all the grievances and keeping score and just coming from that, from the wound, right? But it's having reverence and respect for the journey, how hard it has been, and then having the beginning to develop the communication tools to sit with each other and to say, I'm willing to be a witness to whatever unfolds with you and with me, and releasing the judge, the controller, the all of the ego filters that we bring to it. And that's the mindfulness piece, right? And when the man can begin to see that she has patience and she's softening for him, right? He naturally wants to be better. He does. He There's this beautiful book, not getting the love you want. What is it called? Improving Your Marriage Without Talking. And we can link it in show notes. And it talks about how men and women have different vulnerabilities. Women live with a lot of fear. We fear our partner leaving us. We fear being left alone, whatever fears we live with. While men naturally are programmed to have shame. So what happens with a lot of men with a awakened woman or woman on the awakening, spiritual awakening journey is they feel shame. They feel shame that they're not enough, that they cannot provide what she wants. So the question we can all ask ourselves, how can I mitigate that? How can I make them feel safer? Because what happens when they're in shame? It's a downward spiral, right? Like shame is the lowest frequency emotion. How do you come out of it? So as we're pointing fingers and saying, can you get out of your victim? Well, actually they can't, because we're not facilitating, we're not making it easier. And it's a partnership. We signed up for a partnership. And honestly, it's not just women that awaken first. Sometimes men awaken first. And I've worked with men who've been on this journey as well. And it's exactly the same thing that happens. And the first thing I always say, can you have compassion? Can you see her as her as the soul that they are, that is a human struggling to reconnect, that is so stuck in separation, that is being othered by you as the unconscious. So can you recognize the divinity, and can you not condemn them for where they are?
And the division, like you just said, that
Yeah.
brought me to just thinking about my own relationship. We've been together about 10 years, and there comes a point where you realize many times along the way, and especially after becoming a mother each time, where you shift so dramatically and you realize everything that I wanted then is not what I want now. Or most of the things that I want now are completely different than what I wanted when we were first together, when we first got together. And so you really have to keep having these talks to, I call it like resetting the container. And we just went
Yes.
on a trip where we sat down and I'm like, okay, we got that. That was the first 10 years. What do we want these next year, 5 years, 10 years to look like for us? What are our dreams individually, but also as a partnership and also as a family? And what do we want that to look like now that our kids are getting older? And it's so important that you continuously have those conversations because, as my husband loves to say, they're not mind readers. They don't know what you're thinking. And we, as the, whether it's the woman or the more feminine in the partnership, kind of guides that. So thank you for bringing that up as well. And that was another question I was going to ask you is, do you ever coach the men? And do you find that you have to use, I don't want to say coaching tactics. How does coaching men differ from the women? That's what I'm curious about.
I think men are really surprised when a woman can show so much compassion and really witness them. Like they're not used to that. And they're really touched and they open up so quickly. And I am told by my guides all the time that I'm actually really here for the men. Through the women, I get to the men. And men come to me in events and workshops. And even when I do readings, because I do soul magic readings where I connect to your soul, the women's souls, and I receive the whatever needs to be integrated, whatever needs to be shifted. And a lot of the time their partner souls come through. And I can see them so clearly. And I could see the beauty. It makes me cry every time. And I could see how they're crying for change, but they can't. They feel stuck, right? And I think men, when they receive that glimmer of hope, that they get a taste of what's possible, because as women, we see that a lot, right? And when they're witnessed, it opens something new for them. They unlock their emotions. Their emotional body becomes more fluid, more flexible, right? And this is why I think in the next 10 years, men's circles are going to be just the most important thing ever. And I will say on record, I predict that many of our husbands are going to step into leading men's circles and being guides for men and being the bringers of the divine masculine, the birthers of the divine masculine. Because a lot of the women that are drawn to this work and are consciously doing this work with partners who are not quite there, especially mothers who have boys, are tasked with being the doulas for the divine masculine coming as a consciousness and entering the physical men, boys that are here. We are revealing to them a way of being that prepares them to be these hosts for the divine masculine consciousness. But first, we have to embody that divine feminine, right? That healed, mature divine feminine.
Yeah.
The wise woman, the queen that he's called to revere, to bow to. But at the same time, we are being asked to bow to the divine masculine that we are here to witness be birthed.
For anyone who's listening who's like, what is divine feminine? What is divine masculine? What's your easy explanation for, you've already explained the divine feminine, but what do you consider the divine masculine? And can you touch on also, I think it's so important, the wounded masculine that you and I have very much grown up with if you're around our age group.
Well, let's define both. So the highest expression of the feminine essence, we can call it divine, right? She's the queen. And not the way that word gets used. I'm a queen. No, like truly, she is holding that frequency of generosity, empowering other women, sisterhood, no competition. That's the wounded version, right? She is magnanimous. She is like a vast ocean. She is generous and birthing a new world, right? The immature version, the wounded version of that is not trusting other women. It's always stuck in comparison, the feeling the unworthiness and that unhealed, questioning yourself, not trusting yourself, all the things. So when we come into our power and we make decisions from our intuition, from our guidance, we have discernment, we're in our sovereignty, but we are also fluid and flexible and receptive in all things that water and earth are, right? Those expressions. But we are also creative because the feminine has that fire of creation in her womb that she's bringing. And then the masculine, the toxic, immature masculine, is the one that has no respect for life, has no respect for the feminine, for the mother, for that hasn't been taught to have reverence for the female body and all functions of it. That is, again, stuck in comparison, competition, in victimhood, in with aggressive to protect himself, with separation, with when he is in his protective warrior energy, it's always in opposition of something. When the divine masculine comes in, he's standing with the divine feminine in defense of all of life. He is the protector of the feminine, of life. It's the king energy, the clear mind. It's allowing the divine to flow through and not lead with the ego. It's a man who has activated and opened his heart to feel all, to be with all, that is not afraid to see anything that she brings to him. There's so much courage. That's such an activated heart. And the divine masculine, to me, it's warm, strong, open, welcoming. He's not shut down and prickly. And when he's in his warrior, he is not in an opposition. He is in defense of all of life. He sees the other, the unconscious, as something that he can bring love to and bring light to and transmute it. So he's powerful and he's needed. And it's important to note that there is a version that we are the yin yang within ourselves, right? That we have both of those aspects, and we are here to integrate some version of both of them and to bring both of them to the highest possible expression in their highest frequency.
That's so beautifully said, Kat. You really painted the picture there. I think for everyone that's listening, you just like see all of the images as you were speaking. And I also just want to say, in same-sex couples as well, like there is always going to be one person who is playing more the role of the divine masculine, the divine feminine. So when we speak on this, I just want to make that clear for anyone who's listening. As you were talking, I was just thinking about you as a mother. And, my oldest is a boy as well. And I think about this all the time with him, like what values I want to instill in him and how I want to keep his little heart as open as possible. And this generation of parents that we are with these young kids, I see it. I mean, I see the way that we are, many of us, and it could be my area, but I see the way that many of us are so much more empathetic, and we are asking our boys to check on their friends when they fall down and give them a hug and, just keeping their hearts open. What are you doing that you feel might be maybe differently than you were raised, or even differently from the norm where you are, which is Dubai? We haven't even really touched on your background yet. We'll get there. But what are you doing
Oh,
with
you're
your
going to make me
son and also
cry
your
asking me about
daughter?
my kids.
I know.
It's funny. I just wrote a post about my prayer for my kids and all kids. For my son, my greatest prayer and how I find that animals have been a great way for him to open his heart and be in his kindness, be in his softness, really touching that divine masculine as a child. We have two dogs that are like our everything, and modeling how to be with them, how to see God in them, how to see the beauty in them, right? We just, a turtle came to our doorstep the other day, a tortoise crawled to our doorstep, and we took him in and we put him in a box and we fed him and we took him outside. And after a day here, I got the message from him that he just wants to live in our garden. He doesn't want to come in our house. And I was like, that's cool. We just have to protect you from our dogs. And my son, watching the relationship, he runs home from school and he goes in the backyard to find him. We call him Pedro. We don't, he's little, so we don't know if it's a girl or a boy, but we call him Pedro. And the way that he's like, oh, Pedro, do you need some water? I'll get you some water. Because he has seen me modeling that kindness towards everyone, right? And allowing him to be who he is. When he said he didn't want to play soccer or basketball, that's okay. Let's find something else. He found tennis. He wants to run cross country. Okay. He goes to the gym with his dad. Okay. Just allowing him to be in his finding his way with what he likes in sports instead of pressuring him. I didn't make him finish the soccer, 4-month semester, whatever. After 4 sessions, it was very clear it was not for him. And I allowed him to lead, right? And with my son, he's from a very young age, you could see that he is like, he could explain AI to you. It was bizarre, but fostering that. My daughter was at Waldorf where there's no devices. And for my son, I was like, I would actually be doing a disservice to putting you in a Waldorf education. So devices are actually your future. So he went to Montessori and doing coding camps and all kinds of things. And with him, it's funny because he did grow up with my daughter and a lot of the girls in the neighborhood. So he saw that, and he was very comfortable with it. But my goal with him is to teach him about a woman's body, about periods very openly, respecting and not thinking of it as gross. Like, how many of you listening right now, you've had boyfriends and partners, maybe even dads, who've had that, who've carried that belief, right? And it comes from society, it comes from different religions, upbringing, that a woman is dirty when she's when it's her moon time, right? Or anything about birth is disgusting. Like, we have to rewire that. We have to have them begin to admire the woman's body as a portal that brings life. That's my prayer for all boys. And so that the conversation of, teens and preteens, of like learning about periods and sex and all the things, of being like, oh, no, it's beautiful. It's, wow, I have so much reverence for you, and I'm here to support you from a young age, And for our daughters, I want her to know the same thing, but I also want her to know that she is a portal for life and creation, and that she can do whatever she wants in this life, that it's infinite possibilities, not in terms of manifestation hacking through life, because we have access to all of that information, but truly seeing herself as this surrendered fluid vessel for all of life to flow through, because she as a woman has an easy access to all things intuition, all things source, all things divine. And we've disconnected so many generations from source, and we are here as mothers, conscious mothers, right, to reconnect all of our children to it, and not allow the mocking or questioning of any practices, no matter which tradition you come from. Mm-hmm. Having that respect and reverence for everyone and their belief systems, stopping the othering. And it's time to end, time to shift, and stop fighting the inner wars and the outer wars by becoming vessels of love that we can teach from a young age, that we can instill in them by being examples of it. But for me, it's been really hard. I'm actually much softer on my son than on my daughter. And I think for me, it comes My mom had two daughters. She was a daughter, didn't have any brothers. My grandmother has a sister. So there's this programming that I'm having to rewire within myself, that as a mother, you don't have to be hard on your daughter, because there's the belief from the ancestral line, it's a tough world for a girl. You have to be tough. You have to be a fighter. You have to be leading with your masculine. You have to get a job in, my dad wanted me to get a job in banking or whatever, because I can provide myself. You don't need a man, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I feel like my husband has that with my son. And I will pull him aside and say, "You are so much harder on him than you are on Kenzie and Coco." And yes, they're a bit younger. And yes, he's the firstborn. And I find that in most families, people tend to be hardest on their firstborn. We expect more. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right." But it's all conditioning. It's all conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when they notice that, right,
Mm-hmm.
it breaks something in them, because
Yeah.
they're always comparing as siblings. And that's the other thing, stopping the comparison and the competition between
Mm.
siblings. We have
Yeah.
to end that. We have to teach our kids to celebrate each other.
Yeah.
And especially for our daughters, it's like, can we celebrate the sisters, other women? Like, that is the ultimate healing in the feminine. Even when we think we
It'll,
don't have it anymore, we've healed it. There's always like that deeper layer. And if we are open to healing it, we can begin to recognize the loops and heal it and move keep moving higher in the spiral expansion journey, instead of being stuck in loops for ourselves and keeping the collective stuck in it too. You hear me talk about this all the time, that
Mhm.
what's happening in the collective is just a reflection of our inner world, that it's the as within, so without, as below, so as above, so below, right? That whole concept. And I truly believe that everything that we're seeing is a reflection of the wars, even the rejection of the unconscious we find within ourselves. That rejection and not acceptance and not self-compassion, anything that is not self-love, is being manifested in the world of the othering, the condemning the unconscious, instead of embracing it in the other as we would in ourselves.
Yeah.
Always starts with us. Always,
It all starts at home. It all starts at
with
home.
us.
I was just talking to another mom about this, how I know I had such a pattern, and I feel like so many women I know have had a past pattern of like trauma bonding or gossip bonding, where it was like that's how you kind of formed your group. It was like, we're all similar and we all feel this way and we don't like that group. And that's kind of how
Mhm.
it was when I was a teenager and even in my early 20s. And then it was trauma bonding over what we'd been through, and that's not healthy either. And so we have to find a way to bond in a healthy way. And I think a lot of women maybe don't recognize that they're even doing it, because I just see it so often with, like neighbors and other mom friends, where I hear them and I don't think they're even realizing that they're doing it, how they're trying to bond by talking badly about someone else. But that's not how you form a real friendship, and that's not sisterhood. That is the opposite of what we need to be doing. And that's something that I I feel it's like a very core pillar of what I'm teaching, especially my girls, is like you were saying, lifting each other up. And as a family, we've said, like, do we really need to all be going to each other's soccer games and dance and all the things? And for me, it's always a yes, because I'm like, no, we are cheering each other on as a family and we're celebrating as a family. And if it doesn't go well, we're comforting as a family. And that's the expectation that I want to set, and that's the pillar that I want to set for my children. So, not to get on my soapbox there, but
No,
uh,
it's so beautiful, and they're so lucky to have you, and they're they're going to do great. They're going to benefit so much from that. But I just wanted to touch on what you said about the trauma bonding and the gossip and the cycles that many are stuck in. And it manifests, yes, in neighborhoods, it manifests in school committees, all the things. It manifests in workplace, in university, sorority, all of it, right? And that's the unconscious. When we are so awake and aware to the energy within, to all of the stuff that's running through us, right? We can no longer be that version of ourselves. But there is one thing that I think plays a huge part in that, and that's alcohol. Because a lot of women bond over what? Bottle of wine, going out for drinks, dinner, and it inevitably brings the worst in us. It turns us unconscious no matter how conscious we are.
I've been thinking about doing an episode on how I stopped drinking alcohol and just my whole journey with that, because it was a battle for me for so many years. And you don't realize until you are past that, like you said, it makes you, in an instant, you become unconscious. And for me, I loved it because I'm such a deep feeler. I didn't have to feel all the things. I was like, it felt like freedom, but it was a false freedom, of course, right? But I love that I didn't have to feel all the emotions. But then you have the next day where you have the emotional hangover of it all, and everything really settles in. But yeah, I mean, it is. I agree. I think wine culture, it becoming the norm, is definitely a piece of that for sure.
It does affect you on the vibrational level of opening a window to your ego, to your subconscious, to start filtering through the parts of yourself that you've kind of been suppressing and pushing and working on
Yeah.
consciously. And it brings it to the forefront. And the parts of yourself that you might have been denying, or you might not have been, some of us will say, oh, I'm so much more fun when I drink, and I become this party animal and all the things. Okay, well, maybe that is a version of you that wants to how you want to show up truly. So why is it not showing up like that fully when you are sober?
Or what's
Maybe
the
there's
fear in
something there.
letting that out? Why not
Yeah.
let that out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to change our relationship with it, obviously, and not use it as a numbing or use it as a connection tool. We can talk forever about it, right? And I don't think anyone can find a really good justification for keeping drinking, for keeping that culture.
Yeah.
There's nothing that will bring gossip out like wine. I'm convinced. I'm
Yeah, I
convinced.
agree. And I think it's one of those things where, I mean, nothing's black and white, right? So it's like some people can live their lives and have a glass of wine every day and they're the exact same person, and it doesn't shift a thing for them. Other people, like if I had a glass of wine every day, for me, it brings out my anxiety and it brings out fear. And if I did that every day, I would be a completely different person. And so you just have to trust your intuition on what's best for you. I will have, a drink maybe like twice a year. Like you said, a margarita. I'm like, oh, I just want a margarita. And I'll have half of it. And I'm like, just doesn't do it for me. But I still will do it like twice a year.
Yeah.
Just test it out. But it just doesn't do it for me now.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And for when you have that awareness of what it does for you next day, for me, a glass of wine or anything, my body would be sick. My physical body couldn't handle it. My liver could not take the toxins from it. Like I could be emotionally fine and maybe I would be a little more negative or whatever, but my body would tell me no. So can we listen to our bodies better? Agree with you, the anxiety, the all the things, but a lot of people use it to as a numbing agent for anxiety, for all the
Right.
things, social anxiety or work anxiety, and but it's a depressant. It makes us depressed. It
Yeah.
really it does.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I started using it as a teenager. I was like, oh my gosh, one, I don't have to feel all the things, freedom, false freedom.
Mhm.
And then two, it was social anxiety. I was able to always put on a very confident front, but inside I was so shy and just like, I would get such anxiety about even going to school that I would sometimes have to stay home because I would work myself up about it. And so when I started drinking, it was like, oh, I don't have to feel that anymore. And you're right. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge depressant, but once you get in that cycle, it's very, very hard to get out. I was in and out of that cycle until 32 years old, truly. Like basically until I was ready to become a mom. And I started that when I was 15, 16. I mean, and I'd have cycles where I would be running marathons and I wouldn't be drinking and I'd be feeling so good. And then somehow I get sucked back into it and it's vicious. It's really hard to get out of. So I have a lot of compassion for anyone that's in that who's listening or anyone who's been where I've been.
I also think it's important to bring the children into this because
Mm,
my kids are 11 and 10, and I do wonder sometimes. Right now we live in Dubai, but when we move back to the States, the culture of parties, 16-year-olds, all the things. You know, you can shelter your kids and send them to a forest school, but when they become teenagers, right? Like who they hang out with and all the things, how we have to wire them and what we have to instill in them to have that trust, to have that openness, to have those discussions with them, right? And also knowing what everything we know about how our ancestral, bloodlines, all the things we have with alcoholic parents on both lines, and even if we may not recognize, but there were alcoholic grandparents, I truly believe it runs in the bloodlines. The what this means for our children and how we talk about it and how we bring consciousness into this, right? Making them aware of, if you drink, do you like who you are as a conscious being? Can you look from the outside and say, what kind of person, how does it change me? How do I relate to others? Do I still see the beauty and divinity on them, or am I starting to nitpick what is wrong with them? Because that's the first sign right there. You suddenly
yeah.
start noticing, why is she wearing that makes her thighs look a certain way, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's not me. That's that voice that was suddenly the door open for that voice to come in. But interesting that it's still there. Thank you for bringing up to the surface. Now I can work with this. Okay, thank you. No more no more no more drinking.
I
Yeah, and
think
it's
about that a lot too with my kids. It's like I went to a huge, huge college that was a huge party school and football and, all the things. And it was very much ingrained in the culture that that's what you did. And if you weren't going out partying, then what were you doing? Because that's what everyone was doing. And so I feel like I, being a mom of young kids, I have not had to encounter this yet. So anyone who's listening who has older kids, feel free to send me a message on what you're doing. But it's like there's two components to it for me where I don't want to make something forbidden like candy where they're like, "Ooh, I've got to do this cuz I'm not supposed to." So it's like that forbidden fruit. And then the other piece of it is how can I help my children be so steadfast in who they are and what their truth is that if their friend is a drinker, they can say, "Nah, I'm just not interested, but that's cool. Like, you do you." How can I help them become that confident, the most confident version of themselves at a super, super sensitive time when everyone's just not that confident because they don't know who they are yet. So it's like, how do you help them anchor that in? And I feel like a piece of that, as I'm saying it, is also they need to know that they can come to you about anything and you're not going to judge them. And if they make a mistake, it's going to be okay. And they're going to make mistakes and it's all going to work out. But yeah, there's just so many components to this. And I think about it a lot because I have this fear of them just falling into the same trap that I was in. And I just don't want that for them. But if that's going to be their journey, I suppose that would be their
It's their
journey.
journey. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
think it's very important to share
Mm-hmm.
your journey, your partner's journey, your relationship with alcohol, recreational drugs, whatever it is. And there's honestly there is a piece that we can have, say you have 3 kids, same upbringing, same everything, but they're two of them, they see somebody jump off the cliff, they're like, that's dumb, I'm not doing it. And then the other one will still jump, right? Because everybody else is cheering and telling them to. Nature, nurture, there's
Yeah.
always that element. I've actually caught my son say to my daughter, well, if she told you to do that, would you still do that? And my daughter was like, yeah. And my son was like, what? It's just who he is, right? He is very, he doesn't need validation. He doesn't need a lot of friends to feel like he is like, why would you want to be popular? What's good about that? Like, he's just very grounded in his knowing and in his everything. And part of it, I think, is because he was bullied in kindergarten, and we've worked through it, and he's come out on the other side stronger. So some of these experiences do serve as, and I don't want to use the word character building, but these soul building experiences for them to be in their power and know that if it happens again, it's like he knows to look at the other person and say, wow, you must really be hurting. What is going on at home? What is going on? I see you trying to connect, but you just don't know how to. Nonviolent communication.
Yeah.
My daughter comes home and says, Mom, the school counselor is not hearing what I have to share with her. I'm like, yeah. Can we send her the link to nonviolent communication? And can you ask her, can you please repeat what you just heard me say?
That's a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, that's
it's
part of
we have
life though,
so much
is
unconscious to unpack
there's so
in the
much.
collective.
That's part of life though, is learning how to deal with all these different types of people. There's such a piece of me that's like, I just want to homeschool my kids and be in our little bubble of, just happiness. But it's like they have to also, one, I don't have the capacity to do that. But
Yeah.
two, I also feel like my kids are meant to be around a lot of different types of people and learn how to navigate that. And I mean, that's part of being a parent, but that must have broken your heart when your son was being bullied. I can't even imagine that
Oh,
because
yeah.
I care
Yeah.
so much more about what my kids are feeling than like my own feelings.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. Yeah. And you also like, well, what is this doing long term? And as a parent, you just go
Yeah.
through all of that. Um, yeah, the homeschooling piece. Yeah, definitely have considered it. We talked about world schooling and all kinds of things. And I love it, but I also know that each child is different. And sometimes I connect to people's souls, I connect to my children's souls. And I know that both of them are here to be these bridges between the deeply spiritual conscious world and the vast ocean of unconsciousness. If they are brought up solely in forest school and all the things, in the only surrounded by the kind people never having to confront these situations, they may not be able to step into their soul mission and these bridges effectively. look at us. We've had the upbringing, the experiences that we've had. I've lived in 8 different countries, and my experience has been very much being not othering anybody anymore. Because of that, thanks to that, I'm able um, to see the beauty in everything, in every religion, in every culture, in how it has shaped everybody to be this mandala that the humanity is. I hope to instill that in my kids, and not be homeschooled and sheltered in some way, because their full potential is to be with all of it, be with that full mandala. But that's not to say that homeschooling is bad in any way, or is not appropriate for some families and some children, right? We have to make the decision from a place of love and openness and receptivity, and not from fear.
Yeah.
Not from saying I'm going to run away and build a conscious community and shelter myself and gather, all the resources in case the world ends or whatever it is, because all of that is fear based. You're not getting the point of it all, right? That we rise as one, that we all have to shift, that we are here to be the guides and the examples, infiltrating ourselves into the normal schools.
Right. Right. We need
Yeah.
conscious people everywhere. I was just having this conversation with a friend who is just incredible, and she does do spiritual sessions, but I'm like, when are you going to make this like your full on business? You're just so good. And she said, I think I'm really meant to, almost like you said, infiltrate the system where I am. She works for a big tech company. And she's like, I think I'm supposed to be here right now to be this like conscious light in this company. And I was like, that's a good point, because I really struggled last year with, do we pull our son from this school? I was looking at all these different private school options because we had a really rough first year of kindergarten, and I struggled with it. And then all summer, I'm still thinking about it. And then all of a sudden, end of July, I was like, wait, I feel like he's supposed to be here right now for a reason. Like maybe he's this bright little light in his classroom, or maybe he's sparking something for his teacher or for his principal. Who knows, right? But I feel like he's actually supposed to be here for a reason. And we can't just, I mean, you can, but it's best if we don't all just run away and, like you said, create our own little conscious communities off the beaten path, because we are needed in cities too. We're needed in all different walks of life. And I felt that way sometimes living in Atlanta, and it's definitely, there's a lot more transplants that have moved in, and it's changing so rapidly. But there was a time period where I was like, I just want to move back to California. Like I feel like I'm not understood here. I want to be around more, like hippie, open-minded people. And I realized no, because I am sparking conversations with the checkout woman at Publix and with my eyebrow girl about random things. And I'm like dropping little light breadcrumbs everywhere I go, kind of helping people open up and think in a different way. And we need more of that to make this shift. So
Yeah.
I still struggle with it with school, though. I still don't know what the answer is. We're still working through it,
But
but
that's the ultimate surrender to for it to be revealed. Can you
mhm.
reveal what the highest good for me, for him, and for me as a guide for him? Where do we go? And it reveals itself, and you just know in the moment. It's the worry about that future, the anxiety about that future is we're not able to receive the answers. We can only receive the answers in the now, right? That's the ultimate.
Yeah.
And for mothers, that is such a hard thing to learn, because all we're programmed to do is to worry about our children. And we're also souls that like to experience and travel places and move and change. Some people like no change, same house
Mhm.
for 30 years. You and I have had this discussion
Yeah.
that we like moving. We
Yeah.
like, um, for me, that's been the ultimate lesson of, can you just surrender? Because anytime you plan anything, you always reroute it. Or you plan and you get it there, and you're like, well, this is actually not what I wanted, because I wasn't creating the intention with my heart. I was doing it with my mind. I was, again, going from programming or from looking what somebody else is doing or whatever it is. Right? And in this moment, it's all okay. Everyone's okay. And if we're not, can you show us how to shift into a higher vibration, into a different experience, into a different timeline? And what you said about your friend, I completely agree. I think our soul purpose is not always to step into being a spiritual guide for having your own spiritual business. It is needed in large corporations, organizations, and my work is with relationships, but it's also bringing me into conscious leadership within organizations. And ultimately, it is all about relationships there too, all about changing the gossip culture at work, bringing that leadership that is based on light, compassion, expansion. It's moving from that victim state that exists in all organizations into the empowered, inspired, both employee and leader. You have so much work to do. So much.
Yeah.
And we're needed, and our children are needed. So, but we have time. We're okay. We're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And I keep saying, I always tell my husband, because he's very much, it's funny, we're such an interesting combination. Like you and I've talked about this so much, where he's very grounded, very earth, very realist, you would call him. And I'm more of like the dreamer. I'm a Pisces sun in astrology, and I keep telling him every time he brings up the darkness in the world, I'm like, you know what? Just think about how incredible this world is going to be when our children are our age, because I can see it. Like, I can feel it. I can taste it. Like, these kids, we are sort of, like you keep saying, the bridge. We're like this bridge that's shifting things, but they are going to really change the world. Like, they're just, their hearts are so open and their energy is so next level. And because of the parents that so many of us have been called to be, conscious parents, these children, there's no other way. Like, the world is going to shift in just dramatic ways, in the most beautiful way. I could never even dream it. I know it's coming. Like, I feel it. So that's always my
And I
rebuttal
think that's
whenever
the
anyone.
most important job, really. Like, as
Mhm.
cliche as it sounds, it's not to lose yourself in the mothering, but also to remember that as conscious spiritual humans, mothers, we are here to lift our children up and to see that maybe, yes, it is about us, but the greatest soul purpose realization is when we are watching our children be the leaders of new earth from the other side, and we're like, oh, I get it, I did it, I did what I came for. But it's not losing yourself in the mothering,
Mhm.
it's finding the balance between the involved committed parent and also bringing your birthing your dreams, showing that um, I'm not going to suppress my own desires and lose myself in this, and lead with
Right.
that. And your
Right.
heart, if you live from your heart, it won't lead you astray. You will accomplish both. Just having patience and not creating expectations for yourself. Just allowing it
Yeah.
to unfold and surrendering to the beauty of that this life is,
Yeah.
and
That's
inspiring them to
beautiful.
see the beauty and not the darkness, not
Mhm.
shying away from the darkness, but to recognize the beauty, living in awe and wonder. if I can give any advice to any parent, it's be an example of that. Stop at every flower, pick up the rocks and the feathers, admire them. I tell every night, my son sleeps with one of our dogs and my daughter with the other. I tell the dog, I love you so much. Thank you for picking us as your guardians. My son started doing that, and I'm like, oh, this is everything.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Having that,
amazing how they just absorb
yeah,
everything and you don't realize
yes,
it until
yeah,
they say it back one day,
yes,
or they say it
yes,
maybe to the grandparents when they're visiting. And yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. They're sponges. They're picking it all up, learning from us, from what we do, how we be, not from what we're saying to them.
Right. How we move
Yeah.
throughout the world. Yeah. That was something for me for so long. It was like, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? And I think we have a lot of different purposes and we have different missions here. And I knew that mothering and parenting was certainly part of my mission. But I realized specifically these last few years that your purpose isn't necessarily what you do, it's who you are. And it's how you
Mm-hmm.
move through the world. And it's just what you radiate. It's not that 1 hour meditation in the middle of the day that I do every day and creating all of my, all my meditations, all my podcasts, all the things. It's how am I treating, like I was saying, the checkout person at Publix, and what conversations am I having with my neighbors, and how am I acting when I'm out in nature and taking a walk with my children. That's our real purpose, I feel.
Yeah, 100%. I also find that looking for your purpose is a every seeker's it's part of the life, but it's like a stage. It's a stage until you recognize that being, when you are being and embodying your soul frequency and source, God, universe, love, from that everything else is revealed without any pressure, without pushing, without controlling, without forcing it.
I could talk to you forever, Kat.
So could I.
I mean,
So could
okay.
I. You mentioned the I'm awake. I'm awake. They're
Yes,
not. It's a
I
free
really want to
workshop.
touch on that. Okay.
Just you can link it in show notes. It's a free 1 hour workshop. When you sign up for it, it also starts a 5 day email mini program of how to improve your relationship with the heart power principles and communication and connection and all the things. And that can dramatically shift you and your relationship. And the last thing I want to say about relationships, your relationship is one of the greatest expansion portals for you that you could have ever encountered in this life. And when we begin to see our partner as that, not the enemy, but our expansion portal, that they are showing us what needs to be shifted, healed, awareness brought to, what piece of it, we see the gift that they are delivering to us, and the way that we see them changes. I could talk about relationships for hours, but
I
yeah, the
know.
workshop,
Perhaps
you
we'll
link
have to
it.
do another
It's
one. I was
yeah.
going to say perhaps at some point, yeah, we'll do another one because, yeah, I feel like there is definitely more we could dive into with relationships. And I love hearing from the listeners. So please message me on Instagram and let me know what you think. And if you have another episode or a relationship deep dive part 2, perhaps Kat and I could schedule that. So what are your current offerings? Because they're always shifting a bit, but you have some staples as well.
The entry point into working with me in any capacity right now is the soul magic intensive readings, and they are 90-minute long. And you come in and you can bring some questions beforehand, or you can come in completely with nothing. And before the session, I connect to your to your soul aspect that wants to come through, that is ready to be integrated, that is bringing something for you. And I've actually started being guided to create AI art for of this aspect. I deliver the channeled messages and I continue to channel during the conversation, but inevitably things come up that are connected to that version, to that soul aspect, that essence. And we work to bring clarity, bring healing, bring a shift into your life. And from there, we can continue to work together in a longer container. If there's a group offering at the time, I may recommend something for you. I may recommend a course, for example, the You're Awake, You're Not. There is a longer self-paced course with live groups. It's called Loving from the Heart, that takes you into a deeper conscious relationship journey. And yeah, there's all kinds of other things. I also do business mentorship. I do conscious leadership stuff. Yeah, but follow on Instagram, connect, message me if you have any questions. As Lyndsey will attest to, I am an always, my doors are always open. My one of my core values in my business is being approachable and welcoming, and no gatekeeping, and sharing everything.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Kat. Thank you so much for sharing all of your nuggets of wisdom. I have no doubt this is going to be endlessly helpful for so many listeners. So thank you for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you
And
for having me. Thank you
of
for having me. It was
course,
such a pleasure.
and we will see you next time.